Get out. Get out of my manor this instant. Do you hear me? How dare you raise your head with such insolence? Did you think I would not know you laid your hands upon my iron strongbox? It was a summer night when the thunder roared as if to tear the heavens apart. The heavy oak doors of the grand manor hall belonging to the wealthy merchant guildmaster Roland burst open, and a woman was thrown violently into the mud. She was Eleanor, Roland's lawful and devoted wife. Her hair, soaked by the heavy rain, clung to her pale face, and her fine wool dress was instantly ruined by the muck. But Roland, standing at the threshold, did not even blink. In his eyes, there was no concern for his wife, only the disgust one might reserve for a filthy worm. Eleanor placed a trembling hand on the muddy cobblestones, trying to rise, but collapsed and cried out, "My lord, I beg of you, do not do this. I swear on the holy cross I never touched your strongbox. What house is this? Is this not the very manor my late father, Lord Thomas, built with his blood and sweat? Is this not the hearth where you and I have shared our lives for 10 years? How can you cast such a wicked lie upon me and throw me to the streets?" Roland sneered and cut Eleanor off. "Silence, you shameless woman! The house your father left behind? Nonsense. This manor is mine now. When your father died and this household was crumbling, who rebuilt it? It was I, Roland. And yet you dare to line your own pockets behind my back? The jewels you stole were found hidden in the chambers of my mistress, Cecily, and still you try to deny it?" From behind Roland, a young woman in a lavish silk gown, Cecily, stepped forward, a wicked smirk playing on her lips. She feigned shock, covering her mouth as she clung to Roland's arm. "Oh, my lord, please do not let your anger consume you. Perhaps the lady of the house had some secret gambling debts to pay? She was the mistress of this manor once. Do not have her flogged. Just send her away quietly. It is embarrassing for the village folk to see." At Cecily's deceitful words, Roland glared at Eleanor and shouted, "Did you hear that? You were so blinded by jealousy of Cecily's kind heart that you tormented her, and now you resort to thievery. I cannot bear the sight of you, so get out at once. Never show your face to me again. If you ever lurk around this estate, I will hand you over to the sheriff and have you rot in the castle dungeon." Roland gestured to the manor guards. "You there, what are you standing around for? Drag this woman out the gates immediately and bar the heavy iron latch." "Forgive us, milady." The guards grabbed Eleanor's arms with troubled faces. "Let me go. I will walk out on my own 2 feet. I said let me go." The sound of the massive oak doors slamming shut struck Eleanor's heart like a thunderbolt. Standing before the barred gates, Eleanor wept bitterly under the relentless pouring rain. 10 years ago, her father had taken in a starving beggar who was dying of the winter cold in the market square. He fed him, clothed him, taught him the merchant's trade, and even made him his son-in-law. Now, Roland was repaying that grace with betrayal, and it felt as though her chest was being ripped open. Colder than the freezing rain was the heart of a man. The truth was, a mere decade ago, Roland was a nameless, wandering orphan. Eleanor's father, Lord Thomas, had found Roland on the verge of freezing to death before the manor gates on a bitter winter day. Taking pity on him, He brought him inside. Oh, how did a young lad end up in such a wretched state? Stay in my hall, run errands, and at least have some warm barley porridge and bread. Roland was quick-witted and sharp with numbers. To win Lord Thomas's favor, he worked day and night, playing the part of the most diligent and loyal servant in the realm. Lord Thomas was so impressed by Roland that he married him to his only daughter, Eleanor, and entrusted him with the Merchant Guild. However, the moment Lord Thomas passed away from old age, Roland revealed his true, hidden nature. This guild is mine now. The old lord is dead, and this is my kingdom. He seized the merchant empire Lord Thomas had spent a lifetime building and began a life of debauchery. Every night he frequented the taverns, squandering silver coins on ale and mead, and became entirely bewitched by Cecily, a woman known for her vain beauty. Eleanor pleaded with him in tears, but she was met only with violence and disdain. Is your father not watching from heaven? How can you act this way? What can a dead old man see? Stop your nagging. Eventually, Roland brought Cecily into the manor. To create an excuse to throw Eleanor out, he conspired with Cecily and framed his lawful wife as a thief. That very night, after driving his innocent wife out into the storm, Roland and Cecily clinked their silver goblets in the master chamber, celebrating their victory. My lord, it feels as though a rotting tooth has finally been pulled, does it not? Indeed it does. Now, the masters of this manor are me and you. With nowhere to go, Eleanor wandered aimlessly through the wind and rain. Her worn leather shoes slipped off, and the soles of her feet were torn and bleeding, but she felt no physical pain. A betrayal deeper than the bone gnawed at her soul, far worse than the hunger and the biting cold. She stood by the rushing river at the edge of the medieval village, staring down into the dark, churning water. Should I just die right here? I have no face to show my father in the afterlife, so what is the point of living? Just as Eleanor was about to throw herself into the freezing currents, her father's voice pierced through the sound of the rain, ringing out like a vision in her mind. Eleanor, do you not feel the injustice? If you die, that treacherous hound will live a long, prosperous life, eating the finest meats. Are you content with that? Will you just watch as the wealth I built with my blood and sweat is squandered on their vile pleasures? Eleanor suddenly snapped to her senses and bit her lip. She tasted the metallic tang of blood. Yes, why should I die? The one who deserves death is not me. I must live. I will survive at all costs, and I shall have my revenge. I will reclaim my father's estate and make those beasts weep tears of blood. She turned her steps away from the river and headed deep into the forest, finding refuge in a small, forgotten monastery. There she lived humbly, doing the hardest labor without taking the vows of a nun. By day, she plowed the rocky fields, and by night, by candlelight, she studied old merchant ledgers, waiting for her moment. Then, one day, she met an elderly woman who had come to the chapel to seek shelter from the rain. Though dressed in plain linen, the old woman's eyes were sharp and piercing. Eleanor served the old woman with the utmost care, offering her warm soup, a loaf of bread, and a dry place to sleep near the hearth fire. A few days later, as she prepared to leave, the old woman called out to Eleanor, "Milady, there is a sharp axe hidden in your eyes. I know not what your tale is, but an axe alone is not enough for revenge. You need power. I am an old merchant who trades across the great cities. Will you come and learn the trade under me?" As it turned out, that old woman was Dame Martha, a legendary merchant guildmaster whose name was known across the kingdom. Eleanor followed Dame Martha, and for 3 grueling years she poured her blood and sweat into mastering the art of trade. She learned how to manipulate the minds of men, how to make the false appear genuine, and how to bait the deeply greedy. When 3 years had passed, Eleanor had become Dame Martha's trusted heir, rising to a position where she commanded massive fortunes of silver and gold. At last, the time had come. In the intervening years, Roland's merchant guild appeared grand on the outside, but it was rotting from within. Because of Cecily's vanity and Roland's gambling addiction, the Manor's vaults were emptying, and reckless investments had caused his debts to snowball. Curse it all! Another loss. Is there nowhere I can borrow more silver? Roland was constantly scheming to make a massive fortune in one stroke to clear his debts. Then, one day, a strange rumor began to circulate in the muddy market square. "Have you heard? A great merchant from a distant foreign land has arrived, and they say the goods he brings are the legendary Firestones." Firestones? What in the world are those? They say they are crimson gems found only in burning mountains. They glow with their own light in the dark. Keep one close, and it cures any illness and restores youth to the old. They even say if you offer one to the king, you could be granted a noble title. Lord have mercy! Does such a precious thing truly exist? That great merchant is currently looking for a guild to grant the exclusive rights to sell these Firestones. Roland, who was gullible and consumed by greed, could not possibly miss such a rumor. A cure for all illnesses, the return of youth, and even the king's favor. If I can just get my hands on this, I will not only sweep up all the wealth in the kingdom, but I could even become a nobleman. After asking around, Roland sought out the roadside inn where this mysterious merchant was staying. In the private chamber of the inn, a red velvet curtain was drawn, and behind it sat the foreign merchant, whose identity was completely veiled. Giles, an old steward acting as the merchant's agent, stepped out and greeted Roland with an air of arrogance. "My master does not grant an audience to just anyone. However, having heard the reputation of Master Roland, we are granting you a special opportunity." Roland bowed deeply, rubbing his hands together. "Oh, it is a great honor. May I lay my own eyes upon this item you call the Firestone?" At a signal from Giles, a servant brought out a small wooden box. When the box was opened, it revealed a red stone the size of a man's fist, and in the dim candle-lit room, it truly emitted a soft crimson glow. In truth, it was an elaborate fake, commissioned by Eleanor from foreign craftsmen, mixed with crushed fireflies and special powders. Roland's eyes went wide with madness. "Oh, look at this brilliant radiance! It is real! This is truly real!" Giles closed the box and spoke coldly. "This item was brought back at the risk of our lives from the treacherous volcanic lands of the East. The supply is strictly limited, so we plan to trade with only one merchant guild. Roland swallowed hard and asked desperately, "How much is required to secure those exclusive rights?" Giles held up 5 fingers. 50,000 silver coins. And you must leave the sealed parchment deeds to your most valuable lands as collateral. My master values trust above life itself. 50,000 silver coins. 50,000 silver coins was an astronomical sum. It would require not only Roland's entire fortune, but also borrowing heavily from moneylenders just to scrape it together. Yet the light of reason had already vanished from Roland's eyes, replaced only by the blazing fire of greed. Understood. I will have it ready within 3 days. You must absolutely not hand this over to any other guild. Roland rushed back to his manor and pulled out every deed he possessed. The deed to the grand stone manor, the deeds to the shops, the parchments for the manor fields left by his late father-in-law, and even Cecily's precious jewels. He gathered every last piece. Cecily stood by, anxious, trying to stop him. "My lord, is this truly wise? 50,000 silver coins? If this turns out to be a fraud, we will be out on the castle road begging. Should you not be more careful?" Roland roared in fury. "Quiet, you ignorant woman. This is the chance of a lifetime. Once I get my hands on those glowing stones, I can buy you 1,000 silk gowns, and we will live like royalty for generations." "Do you doubt my merchant's instinct?" But silence. "Do you think I do not know you are just whining because you do not want to give up your jewels? Hand them over without another word." In the end, Roland even sought out Oswald, the ruthless local moneylender, taking out a loan with murderous interest rates to secure the 50,000 silver coins. And on the agreed day, he frantically hurried back to the inn. The merchant behind the velvet curtain remained silent, while Giles came forward to meticulously inspect the silver coins and the sealed parchments. "Excellent! The deeds and the silver are all in order. The contract is sealed." Giles stamped the documents with a wax seal and spoke. "Go out to the river docks early tomorrow morning, and a ship carrying the firestones will arrive. They are precious goods, so make sure to inspect the 500 crates carefully." Roland handed over the deeds, leaping with joy, and returned home. That night, Roland could not sleep a wink. Even staring up at the timber ceiling of his bedchamber, Roland felt as though glowing red jewels were floating before his eyes. "I am now the wealthiest man in all of England," he thought to himself. "I do not even envy the king upon his throne." The very next morning, Roland led a great host of servants and manor guards, marching with absolute arrogance down to the misty river docks. Through the thick morning fog, a massive merchant cog was indeed sailing into the harbor. The ship flew grand red pennants from its mast, and upon the wooden deck, heavy wooden crates were stacked as high as a mountain. "They are here! My treasures have arrived!" Roland shouted, his voice cracking with wild excitement. "You lazy dogs! Unload them at once! Handle them with care, lest you scratch a single stone!" The dock workers and servants groaned under the weight as they carried the heavy crates down the wooden planks. Roland's hands trembled with violent anticipation. He snatched an iron crowbar from a worker and violently pried open the lid of the topmost crate. This was the moment brilliant, blinding red light was supposed to spill forth and wash over him. But as the wooden lid splintered open, Roland's ecstatic face froze into a mask of horror. What lay inside the crate were not radiant, magical jewels. "What is this?" he whispered. The crate was filled to the brim with ugly, misshapen cobblestones, the exact kind of heavy, worthless rocks one could find scattered along any muddy riverbank. The only difference was that these common stones had been sloppily slathered in cheap red paint. The paint was not even fully dry, and the pungent, sickening stench of wet dye and fish oil rose into the damp morning air. No, this cannot be. This is merely the packing material. The real firestones must be buried underneath. Like a madman, Roland clawed desperately at the painted rocks, staining his hands a bloody red. But no matter how deep he dug, he found nothing but the same worthless, painted river stones. "Open another one! Smash the other crates open, now!" he screamed. The servants frantically brought down their axes and crowbars, splintering crate after crate. But the dreadful result was exactly the same. All 500 crates were packed entirely with useless, red-painted rocks. This cannot be happening. This is impossible. Catch that foreign merchant. My silver. My manor deeds. Shrieking like a slaughtered pig, Roland rallied his guards and sprinted back up the castle road toward the roadside inn. But when he burst through the heavy oak doors, the inn was entirely empty. The lavish velvet curtain, the mysterious foreign merchant, and the strict steward Giles had all vanished in the dead of night, leaving not a single trace behind. No, my fortune! My 50,000 silver coins! Roland collapsed onto the dirt floor of the inn, beating his fists against the ground and wailing in pure agony. Just then, the sound of soft, steady footsteps echoed across the empty wooden floorboards of the inn. Roland slowly raised his tear-streaked face. Standing before him was a woman dressed in a fine, elegant wool gown, her face hidden beneath a heavy linen hood. Slowly, the woman reached up and pulled back her hood. "It has been a long time, my dear husband." Roland's eyes bulged so wide they nearly popped from his skull. The breath caught in his throat, choking him. The woman standing before him, with a regal, commanding presence, was none other than Eleanor, the lawful, wronged wife he had violently cast out into the freezing rain 3 years ago. How are you here?" Roland stammered, his entire body shaking. Eleanor looked down at him, a cold, piercing smile touching her lips. "Do the firestones please you, my lord? I spent many sleepless nights painting those river rocks with my own 2 hands." "What?" Roland gasped. "Then you wretched woman, you tricked me!" Trembling with absolute fury, Roland pointed a shaking finger at her. "Tricked you?" Eleanor replied, her voice as hard as iron. "I think not. I merely returned the exact favor you showed to my late father, Lord Thomas, and to me. You coveted my father's wealth. You betrayed his saving grace, and you framed his lawful wife to cast her into the mud. Considering the price of your treacherous soul, 50,000 silver coins is far too cheap a penalty, is it not? You evil witch! How dare you! Give me back my silver! Give me back my deeds! Losing what little sanity he had left, Roland lunged wildly at Eleanor. But in that very second, the heavy doors of the inn were kicked open, and a squad of armed men stormed inside. "Arrest Roland!" The sheriff marched forward, blocking Roland's path, and threw heavy iron shackles at his feet. "You foolish man," the sheriff barked. "Word has reached the Crown Authority that the manor deeds you pledged as collateral to Oswald, the ruthless local moneylender, were entirely forged. Furthermore, you are hereby charged with the theft of Lord Thomas's estate, framing his lawful daughter, and evading the king's taxes. You are going straight to the castle dungeon." "No, no, my lord sheriff, you do not understand. I am innocent. I was the one who was swindled. This woman orchestrated it all." "Eleanor, please, save me. I was wrong. Forgive me just this once." Roland fell to his knees, desperately clutching the hem of Eleanor's gown, crawling on the dirt floor and begging for his life. But Eleanor coldly and firmly pulled her dress from his grasp. Her eyes were as freezing as a winter storm. "Forgive you?" she said softly. "That word was struck from my heart the night you betrayed my father's charity and threw me into the freezing mud. Only when you lose the wealth you loved so dearly, the mistress you favored, and your own pathetic pride, will the bitter resentment in my soul finally be put to rest." At that moment, through the open doors of the inn, Roland caught sight of Cecily. The vain mistress had packed all the remaining silver and jewelry into a heavy bundle and was fleeing down the muddy road. "I am leaving," Cecily shouted back over her shoulder. "I cannot live with a penniless criminal. Cursed be my luck." "Cecily! Cecily, do you abandon me too? Come back!" Roland wailed in absolute despair, but his cries fell on deaf ears as the sheriff's deputies dragged him away by his collar, hauling him off to the cold stone dungeon. After Roland was dragged out of sight, Eleanor reached into her cloak and pulled out a thick stack of sealed parchments. They were the very deeds to the lands and the manor that Roland had eagerly handed over to her agent. In truth, guided by the legendary wisdom of Dame Martha, whom she had met at the old monastery, Eleanor had planned this revenge with absolute perfection. She had spread the false rumors of the magical firestones, used Giles as her trusted agent to bait the trap, and legally reclaimed every last penny and acre of her father's stolen legacy. That evening, Eleanor returned to Lord Thomas's grand manor hall. Looking at the overgrown courtyard and the grand timber walls that had been neglected by Roland greed, Eleanor finally let out the tears she had held back for 3 long years. "Father, I have reclaimed our home at last," she whispered into the wind. "Please forgive your foolish daughter. I swear upon my life that no such injustice will ever taint these halls again. I will protect our legacy. Rest in peace now." In the years that followed, Eleanor used her reclaimed wealth to establish a massive merchant guild. Applying the brilliant trade secrets she had learned from Dame Martha, she grew her fortune tenfold. But unlike Roland, she used her vast resources to fund the parish church, feed the starving peasants, and heal the sick, becoming the most respected and beloved merchant in all the land. As for Roland, his fate was sealed in misery. He was given 100 lashes at the whipping post and locked away in the damp, rat-infested castle dungeon for years. By the time he was finally released, he had contracted a terrible wasting illness. Stripped of his fine clothes, his manor, and his pride, he was reduced to a crippled beggar. He had nowhere to go. His former drinking companions mocked him, and Cecily had long since vanished with another wealthy nobleman. One freezing winter day, when the snow fell thick over the muddy market square, Roland found himself standing in a long line of starving beggars. He was waiting for a free meal at a soup stall funded by Eleanor's charity. Dressed in filthy, foul-smelling rags and limping heavily on a ruined leg, Roland looked less than human. When he finally reached the front of the line, the person ladling the hot soup looked up. It was Eleanor. Their eyes met. Roland's breath hitched. Overwhelmed by a crushing wave of shame, guilt, and bitter regret, he could not even lift his head. He trembled violently in the freezing wind. "Milady, just a little bread," he croaked, his voice broken. Eleanor paused for a moment. Then, without a single word, she took his battered wooden bowl and filled it to the very brim with a steaming stew of meat and barley, handing him a fresh, warm loaf of bread alongside it. She offered no curses. She offered no insults. Her eyes held only the calm, quiet pity one might show to a dying forest beast. And that was Eleanor's final mercy, which served as her most devastating and absolute revenge. Roland limped away and crouched in a snowy corner of the market square. As he greedily shoveled the hot soup into his mouth, he began to weep uncontrollably. With every swallow of the warm broth, the agonizing realization of his own monstrous greed and the ruin it had brought upon him pierced his heart like a rusted blade. But it was far too late for regrets. The water had already been spilled. As a man sows, so shall he reap. Those who live with a pure heart shall find grace, but those who repay kindness with treacherous betrayal will undoubtedly face the wrath of heaven. For generations, the villagers and townspeople would gather around their hearth fires and tell the tragic tale of Roland's downfall, reminding their children that the laws of heaven and earth are never wrong, and that true justice, no matter how delayed, always claims its due.